Today, I'm going to try to draw this rooftop vignette in Nafplio, Greece, and if you've been following along for a while now, you'll know, as I did when I chose the reference, that this is a scene I am unaccustomed to. Maybe not the tower in the background, definitely not that. Maybe not even the flower pots in the foreground, but the mixture of components here, along with the layers, which we'll spend a lot more time talking about, I think, makes for a sort of atypical reference for me. Anyway, we'll get into all of that soon. But first, let's see how I'm getting started. To begin with, the flower pots in the foreground made the most sense to me. Having listened to me ramble about this process in the past, you'll know that I feel that way simply because they are, as stated, in the foreground. That means that in 2 dimensions, they sit atop everything else that I will ultimately draw. So by crafting their respective shapes now, I don't need to worry about where they may or may not sit in the composition. I don't need to worry about overlap. And honestly, placing them first seemed like the best way for me to understand the rest of the scene. So even if I could erase my lines, which I cannot, for some reason, I don't feel like drawing the tower first would help me in any way understand, say, the pots. Maybe that's crazy, maybe it doesn't matter, but that's just how I see it. I feel like starting with the pots helps me figure out the tower in some way. Anyway, you'll notice that I treated these pots incredibly casually, and that's because I just want their general shapes over and done with. I can get sidetracked with stuff like this, I've recognized. So I've learned that it's important for me to, get it over with sometimes. So with the big pot on the right, instead of suffering over every one of these ridges, trying to get the perfect shape and shadow and all that, I just made this semicircular shape all the way down, almost like a close ring around a planet. And even though it doesn't look like much, it fills in this part of the page like a placeholder. And it gives me a rough guide for when I want to get serious about it, if I so choose. Also, quickly, if you're enjoying the video or the series in general, consider subscribing to the channel, liking the video, and or leaving a comment. Slowly but surely, I'm growing, and it's great to see. So to help support me and what I'm doing, stick around. And if you're new here and you don't know what I'm doing, I am learning to draw while I travel the world. I'm 121 days into the process, and while it might not always seem like it, I have learned a lot along the way, and turning that into this series has been a real labor of love. So the same goes for you. Stick around. All right, with the flower pots out of the way for now, I'm comfortable to move back, like deeper into the scene, which is exclusively made up of these tiled rooftops in the middle. These have actually appeared in countless videos over the past few months, but they're almost always from a lower perspective. I'm used to drawing them more vaguely, or just like the edges of them as they overhang off of a roof, but I don't have much practice with this. However, I don't think I care. I don't think that matters very much, because while I do want this middle section to be part of the drawing, I don't want it to call much attention to itself. Instead, I want the foreground and the background to shine, and the midground can act as a little bridge between them. Candidly, I did not know if this was going to work. There was a good chance I'd make a mess in the middle, and it would only confuse the rest of the layering. I didn't really practice this one beyond some very simple compositional type sketches, so I was concerned that I was boxing myself into a corner, but that's not what happened. And I still don't really understand how or why, which brings us back to layers. Layers are still a bit of a mystery to me. I don't think I've ever done a good job at simultaneously implying depth and stacking distinct layers with the same or similar, I guess for want of a better word, focus. And that's still very well may be true, because one trick I know of to imply depth in drawing is by using varying line weight. And that's what I utilize here. I guess detail as well. That shows up here too. So by the end, the tower will sort of just become my primary subject. No surprise there. And I say that because the shadows are darker and the details are sharper. While I eventually make my way back to the potted plants in the foreground, I never bring them up from the paper as much as I do the tower, if that makes sense. They always seem less in focus, and that alone gives the drawing a sense of depth. That and the vertical composition with each element stacked like this. That suggests that these things are layers in a three-dimensional scene. And, I truly was not expecting to pull this off when I started. Having practiced these drawings with reasonable consistency, I've obviously built up some unconscious skills. I guess is how I'd put it, like muscle memory. And sometimes I think I forget how that can accumulate over time, and how when I'm faced with some novel problem, I can pour a considerable amount of my focus into it, and the rest of the drawing won't always suffer, thanks to those background skills or whatever. So when I'm really considering a layered composition like this one, where each and every element sits in its precise place on the paper, I can really concentrate on that without having to constantly concern myself with whether or not the leaves will look like leaves or the exact proportions of the tower. To some extent, I can leave those parts of the process on autopilot while I contend with the newer, or at least more pressing problem of depth, at least in this case. Obviously, I can't let that get to my head, but it's nice to see a little bit of that in action. So anyway, if you can't tell already, I'm a pretty big fan of this one. Generally speaking, I tend to have at least one issue with my drawings, but I don't feel that way today. There are clear missteps here, but I don't think they matter to the extent that I'd even care to point them out, because they don't matter enough to undermine the point that I've been making. I think from a depth and varied component perspective, this was a big success for me. Hopefully I'll have the confidence to try drawing the next scene like this that I stumble upon, because I'd really love to get more practice. So yeah, let me know what you think of the drawing, subscribe to the channel, and like the video if you have a second. I appreciate you for taking the time to watch this one, and I'll see you tomorrow. Thanks.